Hello, everyone, and welcome to School Psych Podcast. We are live tonight and really excited for a fun topic that we're hoping we'll get some audience participation with. We're going to be talking about topics in school psychology that might be either a little bit controversial or basically we're not all on the same page about, that there might be some disagreement. I wanted to say, too, that a lot of the things that we'll be talking about tonight, I'm sure there's no right or wrong answer, so we definitely want everyone to be sharing their opinions, and just know that, we certainly don't have the fixes for some of these, but think that it's important that we discuss and be aware of alternate views and whatnot out there. So that being said, I also want to mention that a lot of the materials on some of the things that we're going to be talking about tonight are on the Google Drive, and we can go through how to access that on the Facebook page if anyone is a little bit confused. But so we're excited to get started. We've got a lot to cover, and hoping that you guys will join in the participation and join in the discussion. So first off, my name is Rachel, and I'm a school psychologist, and right now I'm working in Maryland. Rebecca?
Hi, I'm Rebecca. I am a school psychologist working in the state of Connecticut. I want to tell you guys about how to participate. I'm going to be checking on both Facebook pages, School Psych, Your School Psychologist, and the School Psych Podcast page. So just comment on the top post, or there's a tab somewhere on each page that says message. You can send a private message, or you can post to page, and on Twitter using the hashtag Psyched Podcast. I'll be looking for your ideas and questions and comments and your thoughts and your position on all of these controversies. So please share any of those ideas and thoughts. And I won't use your name, just so that you feel comfortable, unless you tell me that it's fine. I may just say your first name, or just say, a friend of ours. So definitely comment, because these are, controversial issues, and there's probably, a lot of gray more than black and white, so we have space for all of our opinions. And here's Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm a school psychologist working in New York State. So we had a little discussion going on our Facebook page, wanting to know what hot button issues you guys wanted to talk about. And boy, do we have a laundry list. We're hoping to get to them all tonight, but if there's something really important, comment on the Facebook page, and we'll bump it to the top of the list for you. So here's what we have on our list: ED versus socially maladjusted or behavior issues, PSW, including CrossBattery assessment or achievement, RTI, evaluating for LD, and the general dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, all that good stuff, trauma and BIPs, the impact of social media on bullying, gender, and parent requests for evaluations when the kid's doing fine, base rates. Rachel, this one was yours. Evaluating for gifted, twice exceptional children in schools, ASD assessments, pros and cons of retention, evaluating ELL students fairly and the over-identification of ELL students, and suspension, pros and cons, and then we added executive functioning on there just for fun. So Rachel, you want to go ahead and get us started?
Sure. And I think we're also, what started this conversation is we saw a discussion on the School Psychology Forum Facebook page for age and grade norms. And so you guys should check that out if you get a chance. But we're going to start off, and please, again, tell us what topics you want us to focus on. But we're going to start off right now with ED and social maladjustment. So I have done being in the public schools and having a whole lot of evals. I'm one of those psychs that's like cranking out evaluations some years. And so I do come across quite a couple ED referrals. And in working in a couple different states, I've noticed that there isn't total agreement on ED, especially the social maladjustment clause. So federally, we have this weird little blurb, the definition, that says basically something like, it's not due to social maladjustment unless they're also ED. And Rebecca, I think that you have the if you want to read off the criteria so everyone kind of is aware of what I'm talking about exactly.
Absolutely. So from IDEA 2004, emotional disturbance means a condition exhibiting one or more of the following characteristics over a long period of time and to a marked degree that adversely affects a child's educational performance. A, an inability to learn that cannot be explained by intellectual, sensory, or other health factors. B, an inability to build or maintain satisfactory interpersonal relationships with peers and teachers. C, inappropriate types of behavior or feelings under normal circumstances. D, a general pervasive mood of unhappiness or depression. And E, a tendency to develop physical symptoms or fears associated with personal or school problems. And then the little double I clause is that emotional disturbance includes schizophrenia. The term does not apply to children who are socially maladjusted unless it is determined that they have emotional disturbance under the above paragraph that I just read. So they specifically exclude children who are socially maladjusted. The clause was added to the original 1977 definition of emotional disturbance. But, you know, the clause does not seem to be, you know, completely explained or maybe even understood. And I think that is the controversy. So what exactly does it mean? In best practices, I have the old version of the one before the recent version of best practices, and they said that the above issues muddy the interpretation of social maladjustment clause, but to guide best practice, school psychologists are encouraged to focus first on assessment of IDEA 2004, defined by the characteristics of ED, and if a child exhibits one or more of the 5 defined characteristics plus all 3 qualifying conditions, then that child can be considered to have ED, assuming the possible explanations for the problem have been ruled out, other possible exclamations have been ruled out. Once ED criteria are met, any evidence of social maladjustment is irrelevant for the purposes of determining eligibility for special education. The presence of social maladjustment along with ED, however, is an important factor to consider when planning interventions, since children with externalizing problems, for example, aggressive delinquent behavior, often require mental health treatment and social services outside of school, along with special education. So I'm not sure if that helps clear anything up. What do you guys?
It's just kind of funny to me that why even put it in there if you're going to say unless they're also ED. It's like, you know, oh, you can't be, you know, ED if you're a female unless you are ED. You know, it's like does that make? I know I'm not making any sense, but they put it in there, but then say, but you can be social maladjusted. You can't be social maladjusted, but you can be if you're also ED. So it drives me crazy.
It's a little bit of circular logic, but I think it's, you know, similar to defining according to DSM criteria. We need to have over a prolonged time and to a marked degree and adverse effects. We need to have at least 3, is that right, of these criteria? And we can also have social maladjustment, but we can't have only social maladjustment. So I think that's what they're saying, and maybe the term social maladjustment, you know, includes a lot more than just ED. Maybe I can be temporarily socially maladjusted given my personal circumstances or given a certain circumstance, and that doesn't qualify me for ED. Does that seem possible? I'm not sure.
Like drug use or something like that could come up. That could...
Gangs, I think, could be a potential. I mean, but I know that some states, so New Jersey has their own social maladjusted category of special education. Some states, I think Florida, do an EDBD, an emotionally disturbed and behavioral disordered, so they kind of lump them together. Other states have that exclusionary clause, but don't really abide by it because it's so weird anyways. And then there's other states that are very like, oh no, you're socially maladjusted, you can, like, you know, I don't want to call you ED, and they're very hesitant to do that. And then we just have the problem of what is social maladjustment? We're not defining it really. Some states have. I don't think there's a general federal definition. Some say it's like a conduct disorder, and that would exclude you. Some say internalizing versus externalizing, so your social maladjustment would be kind of an externalizing thing as opposed to internalizing. So it's just like so up in the air, and I don't know. Solve this problem, somebody.
Yeah, somebody out there, if they have any experience with this controversy and have found a way to make some more clear definitions, please let us know in general what you've experienced or what your state does or what your district does to help you define the situation. I think it does come down to a problem of definition. We just don't have all the same definitions by state, and even the federal definition is not that clear.
And I've seen, I think I read a paper once that argued that, yeah, it should be removed. Like, it's just confusing to have it in there and then not really have it matter. That it should be removed, and it hasn't been yet. And some people, I guess, have argued that if you remove it, then you open up kind of the floodgates, that if we have all these socially maladjusted kids now receiving special ed, we're going to have this increase in special education, kids qualifying. But then I've also read that states that have the SM exclusion versus states that do not have it, there isn't a difference in qualification rates. So it's just to me.
And later we're going to touch on trauma a little bit, but I know I posted recently an article about a lawsuit still currently pending, and I believe in Compton area of Los Angeles, Compton School District maybe, that is saying that just because of the violence, the prevalence of violence for these children as they go to school every day, that the trauma affects their ability to learn, and that should be considered a kind of special education, that these kids should get services. So are those kids that are affected by chronic stress and chronic trauma, are they socially maladjusted? I mean, maybe, I would guess yes, but I wonder. And so I think it's related in that way to trauma as well. Unfortunately, a lot of our kids experience trauma on a daily basis.
Yeah. And I do want to say, too, there is in the drive, I do have a social maladjustment versus ED checklist in the Google Drive, just because even though I think it's weird and crazy that it's in that definition, because it is in that definition, I feel the need to address it in some manner when I'm writing an evaluation. So I do use things like the EDDT, which has the social maladjustment, like cluster score of some sort, and then I have that ED versus SM checklist. So if anybody wants to check that out, it might be helpful, but I don't know.
Yes, and just a reminder to people, our Google Drive is on the School Psyched podcast Facebook page. If you click About on our page and then Impress Me, you have to click it because it comes underneath, there's a link, and you can get to our Google Drive. And right now I am going to post in comments under our event tonight just the idea definition that I read before. It's long, but some of you might be interested in reading it again.
Okay, well, let's move on to our next topic. That was a good one. PSW is our next topic.
Okay, is that me? Yeah. Again, that's me. Okay, so PSW. I do want to point out that I found in my recent little research for PSW for tonight an awesome YouTube lecture presentation on CHC theory, PSW, and let me look. But it was. I posted it on School Psych, Your School Psychologist, and it is by Dr. Vincent Alfonso, CHC theory, cross-battery assessment, and SLD, and also the XBAS at the end. It is awesome. It's a really great talk that kind of runs through the whole profile of this topic, and I want to refer you also to a great conversation we had with Dr. McGill on School Psych podcast. I don't remember the episode, but if you look through iTunes or through our School Psych podcast episodes, you'll see the Dr. McGill episode where we talk about the PSW method. And one of the interesting things that I have read and found recently is that, and just kind of thought about it, it dawned on me that we often, as school psychologists, have been doing cross-battery in a sense for a very long time, whether whether we only use one battery and then a learning specialist does an achievement test and then somebody, a speech language person, does an auditory processing kind of thing, and we put them all together, that essentially that is a cross-battery. But now this, a new conception of cross-battery assessment includes norms and includes, you know, a better way of measuring pieces from different assessments. So, I mean, I'm not exactly sure, to be honest with you, what is so controversial about it, except for that it takes more time. In each district, we don't have access to maybe all of the tests that we would like to have. So those are two sort of controversial things. That I may have, you know, the Wechsler scales and, you know, a couple of other things, that I might not have all these tests at my, you know, when I need them. But other than that, what is controversial about this form of assessment? Do you guys have a thought on that?
You know, I think it's partially because state to state we're not evaluating students the same way, and we're not using the same sort of norms and the same guidelines for identifying learning disabilities and issues. So you know, if there's a difference between their perceptual reasoning and their processing speed, oh, there we go, there's something. In one state or with one psychologist, there's a strength and weakness performance difference, and we can identify this as something. But then in another state, there needs to be a very specific cross-battery, and then there's states where it's RTI, and you could do all this testing for fun and go crazy, but if there aren't interventions and if things aren't documented, you're wasting your time. You're probably wasting your time anyway, because really you don't need to do all that extra testing if you're in an RTI state. But I feel like across the board, and when you read the forums, people are talking about scores in completely different ways.
That's true.
What do you think?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I just think that states and schools that are still using the discrepancy model, I just feel like at some point they're using more than one battery of tests, and they're still looking at cognitive skills, and they're still determining eligibility. Maybe their criteria is discrepancy or whatever, but they still have. I mean, school psychologists still have an ethical responsibility to use critical thinking, but I think I hear what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's one of those things too that you see on psych forums and whatnot, where somebody will post about cross-battery, and you've got kind of these two camps that come up. One is like, oh, it's useless, stop wasting your time. The other is, oh yes, it's awesome, and we love this. And so we're totally not on the same page, and I don't think we ever will be with LD. And as you mentioned, Rebecca, Dr. McGill, who had concerns with, do our tests have the ability to tease out these different things that cross-battery and that PSW wants us to tease out. And then we have people like Dr. Burns, who say, okay, you can identify this processing weakness maybe, but is that translating to helping a child academically as far as interventions? Maybe not necessarily. So yeah, you get these two camps of, you know, it's useless, it's a waste of your time, go out and do other things that help children, versus, you know, this is the best way, this is the best practice of LD and interpreting scores and whatnot. And I mean, we could talk all night about it, but I think it's interesting just how people are so, you kind of see a little bit of a fight online sometimes.
Absolutely. I think they are separate, eligibility versus intervention, right? We use one set of definitions and criteria to determine if kids are eligible for special education services, but then deciding what interventions to use is another thing. So if we use cross-battery assessment to determine eligibility, does that mean then we use those assessments to define our interventions? Maybe not, right?
Okay, we're gonna move on to the next topic, trauma and BIPs. We had a wonderful person comment on our Facebook page about how they had a very wonderfully written and well implemented BIP that did not work for this child, and you know, trauma really does impact behavior, and that's another thing that really gets in the way of making a killer BIP, and even if you're implementing it well, we have kids, we don't even know their history, their trauma history. It's not disclosed, but there could be internal triggers that are setting off this child that have nothing to do with the external inattention that we're seeing or whatever. So trauma is sort of like a third factor that we can't necessarily account for, and it doesn't really fit necessarily with our ABC process. And what is being reinforced in the classroom is sometimes different than what's going on inside internally with a child. So trauma definitely complicates the BIPs and can throw a BIP. So there's a great article that Rebecca found that we'll put on our drive, Principals Research Review, the role of supporting traumatized students. So we're going to share that with you guys through our drive because really BIPs aren't always helpful because it's a different issue going on, and children might need a more therapeutic environment rather than like rewards for paying attention and things like that. You know, they might need more support in a different way. And we never know what's really triggering the student and traumatizing them. We don't always know what happens to them, so it's really hard. Do you guys have anything to add to that topic?
I haven't had a whole lot of experience, but yeah, I mean, it's hard too with BIPs with kids that have serious issues with, like, for example, medication side effects and serious psychological and chemical imbalances and whatnot. And it's not always, like you said, Anna, that external, you know, they're being reinforced in this manner. It could be something going on internally that's really hard to figure out what's driving what's going on, and so unpredictable. I mean, it's tough. So.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that, as I was looking up articles on NASP and the resources that stood out to me, is that when we're looking at trauma after the fact, and in terms of a behavior plan or an intervention after, it's really difficult. It's really complicated. There's so many layers of it, but what we could be focusing on, and maybe what we should be, is prevention and trying to identify at-risk populations, at-risk families, and trying to put resources in place beforehand. And one of the things that they suggested was family resources that buffer extreme stressors or against traumatic experiences, family support, connections between school and family, things like that. I think that's a really important point, and kind of a positive psychology point of view, that we can be doing a lot in that area, and sort of preventative and building connections and building resources for people in for children in stressful environments who are maybe more likely to have stress or even a trauma. I like that point, and I think that's important to think about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So our next topic is impact of social media bullying and the school's role in that. I will say that I personally feel like in this day and age with social media so prevalent and technology all around, I think that schools do have somewhat of a responsibility to educate students on safety, and just being aware that if you're putting this out on the internet, this might follow you. I mean, and students a lot of times aren't developmentally ready to understand that long-term consequence. So I think that that's something that schools probably need to be teaching, and maybe school psychologists need to be teaching. Something that I do see in my schools a lot is kids that have cell phones, even at the elementary level. I mean, at the high school, it was so distracting. They were constantly on their cell phones, and even though we had a policy of no cell phones, it wasn't enforced. It could be super just disruptive, disrespectful to teachers, I think. I'm having issues now at the elementary school with kids sending text messages to each other, and you know, we're having to track down who said what and what happened, and it's just kind of a mess. And it's interesting because my husband is a teacher and he has a totally different view. I'm kind of like, let's lay off the technology a little bit, or at least teach them how to be safe and how to use this appropriately. And he as a teacher, really loves technology and integrates that in his classroom and feels that every student should have a cell phone because this is a learning device and this is how they are going to access information during their lives. And I totally get that, but it's everywhere. So he's kind of like, embrace it, and they're going to be appropriate with it, or if not, they're going to learn their lesson. I'm a little bit more conservative about that, a little bit more nervous, but I understand that, you know, anytime you ban anything or restrict anything, that usually backfires. So I think that a school does have a role in that. What do you guys think?
Yeah, two things I want to point out. I like what your husband is saying, because I think part of the education in technology is about digital citizenship. I think we have to teach kids how to use those technologies wisely, how to be safe, how to be their best selves, just as we do in the school and classroom environments. And so again, I think it's a sort of preventative, but I like the idea too of a school to home contract. I don't think it should be binding. I don't think it should be sort of punishable, but I think if we are all on the same page with our values in our communities, we can hopefully make an impact on the way cruelty, bullying, meanness is handled online, just the way that we would when we see cruelty, bullying, or meanness in our schools and in our buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Any other?
And if you wanna read more about it, you can read the article "Just a Click Away" by Dan Florell.
Yes.
And then digital citizenship in there.
Yeah.
Okay. Next topic, Rebecca.
That's me. Okay, let me scroll down. Gender. Are we on gender?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. All right. So there's been a lot of discussion on gender. I put in the drive the NASP position statement on safe schools for transgender and gender diverse students. I think the role of the school psychologist, as always, is to advocate for kids. We need to be in tune with the needs of students. We need to provide evidence-based information about transgender issues. We should advocate, and this is, I'm reading these bullet points from the position statement, but we need to advocate for gender-neutral spaces, safe zones for transgendered students. I think we need more education for the adults in the building, training and supervision when necessary. Modeling acceptance and respect, providing increased awareness of transgender issues, responding to bullying, intimidation, and harassment, which is a prevalent problem with our students, our transgendered or LGBTQ students. No, I'm saying that wrong. I'm sorry. You know what I mean? You'll say it for me later. Responding to bullying, intimidation, and harassment, minimizing bias, providing counseling, attending to the social emotional needs of transgender and gender diverse students, acquiring and providing information on community agencies and supports outside of school, and supporting and contributing to research regarding best practices for integrating transgender and gender diverse students in school. So I'm sorry about the acronym. I'm just nervous, and I do, when I speak fast, I mess that one up. But
a lot of education needs to go on within the school, and a lot of support provided to the student. And when these situations occur, for sure, it's not everyone's on the same page, and there could be some controversy, and there's some risk factors for that young person that would probably need to be on our radar a lot more. LGBTQ is the LGBT. No problem. Okay, so we're gonna move on. Our next topic is parent requests. Oh, the wonderful parent request. Now, personally, by the time the parent request gets to me, like, the consent's already been signed and there's no way to talk them out of it, kind of a thing. Like, it's like the clock is ticking and you're doing your testing. But the person commented on parent requests for evaluation when school performance is satisfactory. So I'm sort of assuming that you're saying the kid is doing totally great and is, like, on grade level and is, like, doing well with their report cards, but this parent wants them to be tested. And what a waste of time is that? Rachel, what are your thoughts?
So, first off, like, I think we need to clarify, people need to realize educational impact, that, you know, we're not just, of course, talking about grades or what they're scoring on the WJ or things of that. I mean, part of their educational experience and educational performance is tied to their social and adaptive and all this stuff that working well in groups and this nature. It's tied up in educational performance. So it's not just grades, it's not just how well you do your math facts or your reading. So that applies a lot to our ED referrals and our ADHD kids maybe. But yeah, if all of that is good and there's no social problems, there's nothing, then I do at the referral meeting try and kind of talk the parent out of, you know, this doesn't seem like an appropriate referral. There's, you know, what are the concerns, you know, and go through that. But it's also not a hill I'm willing to die on, if that makes sense, that I'm not going to sit there and argue with the parent and refuse and get a lawyer, get an advocate. It's just easier for me to say, okay, if you really want this, I'll do it. We'll test, we'll see what happens, we'll go from there. But I do try and talk them out of it if it doesn't sound like an appropriate referral.
And those are the biggest and dirtiest reports that I won't write. It's terrible as that sounds, you know. Not concerned. Okay.
Okay, and then, okay, so base rates. This came from me, and maybe this isn't a controversy, maybe this is my own weirdness, but in some of the states that Hannah's just like laughing at, she's like shaking her head, oh, Rachel and her base rates. And
anyone out there is interested in base rates, please comment now. So poor Rachel, because we're giving her a hard time.
So in some states, you know, when we're doing PSW models, or our district, you know, requires you to look at strengths and weaknesses, or where some of those cognitive scores are falling out, you need to have criteria of what constitutes this is low and this is high, like where is the line? And oftentimes we use base rates. I mean, we look at statistical significance, and then we look at how frequently that split is occurring in the population. And so I do reference that in my evaluations. When I am looking at LD, my district does require the kind of a PSW model, not like a full-on CrossBattery type of thing, but we do have to identify strengths and weaknesses. And so I myself, we weren't given criteria of, okay, it's 0.05 for statistical significance and it's 10 and under for base rate, which is what I tend to use. But in talking with other psychs, some of them use 15% is okay for identifying strength or weakness, and some of them it has to be under 10. And so it just concerns me that we're not all on the same page, because if I test a kid and say, no, there's no clinically meaningful differences in these scores, they don't qualify, end of story, and if another psych 2 schools over were to test them and use 15% as a base rate and say, oh yeah, they qualify LD, that's not consistent, and I feel like that opens us up to lawyer stuff. You know, that if I were a parent, I could argue and say, well, why did you use 10 and under? And I'm kind of like, that's just kind of what I was taught, but I know it's not consistent across the board. So I don't know, base rates kind of bother me because sometimes it's really close. But
I just want to put a plug for Dr. Matt Burns' new column in the communique that is going to be sort of a review and discussion of basic statistics, because as I looked up this issue of base rates, I stopped. I have a lot of things that I printed out that are sitting in a pile right here that hurt my head. So I think maybe that's why I don't report on base rates at all. But if anyone out there has other thoughts, we'd appreciate them.
I would appreciate them. These guys are going to be a hard time. Crazy Rachel and her base rates.
Yeah. Sorry, Rachel. I still don't use them, and I think that they're. But you know, I'm in an RTI state, so. Yeah. You're a stats nerd, and it's a lovable characteristic.
It is.
But did we get a comment, Rebecca? Is that a comment Did I see
Yes, we did get a comment going back to our conversation about profile strengths and weaknesses controversy that one of our viewers, one of our very smart viewers, said that what he gathered from Dr. McGill was that he expressed that our test might not be as strong as we would like in terms of distangling the CHC factors. Along with that, there are a lot of false positives in using some of the CHC methods for LD identification, and also that 3 PSW approaches are not quite congruous. So that's probably all true, and I think even in that long lecture that I posted on School Psych, Your School Psychologist by Dr. Alfonso, he mentioned that some of the tests that he likes to use in the CrossBattery assessment that say they measure certain, either distinct factors or broad factors, he wasn't so convinced that they were measuring what they said they measured. So, yes, I absolutely agree that that's difficult and controversial, as our viewer described.
Mm-hmm. All right, and then next up,
Gifted.
Let's see. Okay, so we're talking about the difficulty with identifying gifted or twice exceptional kids in school. I think part of the difficulty is that sometimes kids that are not twice exceptional, if kids are twice exceptional, often they'll qualify for special education based on the second thing, either the learning disability or that. But gifted in itself is not often, or not always, I believe, a special ed qualification, and sometimes schools don't even have gifted programs. Am I right? Am I wrong about that? I think that some states and some schools do, but sometimes if you're just doing really, really well and you're really, really bright and you may qualify as gifted under certain criteria, if you're just kind of fine, you just go on and there's no evaluation at all. I think the 2E category is special because the student's profile of strengths and weaknesses, the discrepancies sometimes cause trouble for them in their learning and in their academics and in their social profile in school, and that's when they're flagged and when they come to our attention. What do you guys think about the gifted 2E controversy or difficulties in school?
I personally don't have a whole lot of experience with that, so I mean, if anyone wants to chime in, I know we have with the podcast talked about getting somebody on here to talk to us about gifted identification and working with gifted students and whatnot. So I don't really have a lot to say. I'm curious and would like to learn more, but
yeah,
let's put it on the list for future podcasts for sure, because I'm in the same boat, definitely. I actually learned what Gifted 2E was because of this discussion. I didn't even know what that was. So thank you, viewers out there, for making me smarter. We're going to move on to autism spectrum disorder assessments, best practice. Again, this is something that there's nothing really, there's variation from state to state in how we identify kids. They might not have an outside medical diagnosis, and we're left in this when we see some concerning behaviors and there's a problem, and we're left to do an evaluation. So, Rach, I want to call on you because I know you have some experience with this. What is your go-to assessments for ASD?
So I don't really see. I know a lot of people use the ADOS, and I'm not a huge fan, just because. Usually, I'm doing an ADOS when I'm like really on the fence, or getting an ADOS when I'm really on the fence, and I find that at the end of it, I'm still really on the fence. So I use a variety of checklists, and I just observe like crazy, and that's really how I get through it. Interviews and just I stalk the child. I'm in their PE class. I'm in their specials classes. I'm in the cafeteria. I'm seeing their small group work and their whole group work, and just following them like everywhere, and really looking for those characteristics. I trust my own two eyes better than I trust a rating scale, personally.
Mm-hmm.
But,
and like, we own the ADOS where I work, so like that's not a choice. For us, we have a lot of different rating scales and some checklists, social communication questionnaire, and we have a whole autism podcast where I shared some of those. So like the ADOS isn't even an option for a lot of people. So you have to do what's best, and I think what you hit on, Rach, is important, that you have to like observe the child and really see for yourself. You can't just send a checklist home or give it to a teacher and say that this qualifies a child. You need to make sure that you're seeing behaviors yourself and that there is an educational impact, because just because someone's spectrum-y doesn't necessarily mean they qualify too. And Rebecca, you have anything to add?
Oh, me? No, I don't. I'm just thinking I'm thinking about all the recent articles and things that I've read about the spectrum and about, both ends of it, and how some of our greatest gifts are on some level spectrum-y gifts. And so would we even like Dr. Scott Barry Kaufman's work on creativity, and different people that have found that maybe we can carry a gene of autism spectrum disorder and not exhibit those characteristics, but still benefit from some of the great things about it. I think it's really complicated. I feel like it's I think, as Thomas Burns described dyslexia research, it's like science in waiting. I think there's a lot that we don't still know about it, and I think, as you said, Anna, educational impact and trying to support individual kids right now is our best bet.
Mm-hmm. I will say that I do, after doing all my observations and stalking, I do like to fill out a CARS, just based on those observations, but oftentimes when I'm filling that out, I've kind of got a good idea already where I'm going with it. But
Did I say Thomas Burns? I want to apologize. I meant Thomas Barnes. He commented on Mythlexia on the podcast page, and he described well, we'll get to that, but he described the controversies over that as science in waiting. So yeah. Thank you. Shout out to Thomas Barnes.
And yeah, that is actually our next kind of little topic here is dyslexia, dyscalculia, Mythlexia, if he's going to, maybe he's going to copyright that term. I kind of like that. Again, another one of those things that we don't have a consistent definition. And so when you don't have a consistent definition state by state, and DSM, and now dyslexia isn't really in the DSM, it's referenced in the DSM, you just get all these different perspectives on what it is and what it isn't, and it's one of those things that is in the media a lot and in TV shows and things, and there's a lot of misrepresentation, I think. I have a really good handout that's in the drive under, we've got a dyslexia folder in the drive, in quotes, and it comes from North Carolina. It was following the federal, there was a memo from the federal level that clarified that, hey, if you're in special education, you can use the term dyslexia. Don't be afraid to use that term, because a lot of schools, and I've heard a lot of teachers say, oh, no, we don't test for that. Type of thing. And so that memo clarified that you can use that term if you're in the school. There's no reason not to. And so North Carolina, in response to that memo, put out this really nice fact sheet that said it's like a myths of dyslexia, and it's really nice for parents to see. So I'd recommend that everyone go and check that out, and it just kind of goes through some of the misconceptions that a lot of our parents have. But basically, I think it all comes down to, again, lack of consistent definitions across the board. So even school psychs, we're all confused ourselves, it seems, a lot. I see things on the forum. I see things posted everywhere. What really scares me is sometimes on my newsfeed on Facebook, things pop up. It'll be like dyslexia interventions of various companies. And I click on the comments to see, and it's a lot of just angry parents saying that the school knows that my kid is dyslexic and they won't give him services, and da-da-da-da-da, and you need to fight this, and it's just like, it's a hot mess. It's what it is. But what do you guys think about dyslexia?
It's totally a hot mess, and I've seen outside of ALS where they, have a list of diagnoses that they give this child, including dyslexia or dysgraphia or something like that, and then they're evaluating the school, and the testing results in the school and the observations in school are completely different, where if that child would not qualify, but then this outside person gave this diagnosis that they found based on whatever information they had, not from the school, but whatever information they had, and it's very frustrating because you really want to do what's best for kids, and sometimes, like, we don't work together with outside people. It's like we're working against each other and causing this divide with families. It sucks.
Agreed.
So we have a little quote from Thomas Barnes. You want me to read it real quick?
Absolutely.
So dyslexia, there are too many definitions of dyslexia, and there are even different varieties of dyslexia with different meanings, such as surface dyslexia, orthographic dyslexia, and deep dyslexia. From a practical perspective, this is problematic for the identification and treatment of the presenting problem, as it detracts from the epistemology of the concept. For example, I could do a set of tests and conclude that according to X definition, the student did not have dyslexia. Another colleague might look at my findings and point to Y definition and then opine that I had a strange unacceptance. Epistemologically, I believe the shoehorning several clinical and educational profiles into a diagnosis of dyslexia falsely implies that the presenting problem is or caused by a specific entity, dyslexia. I believe that our need for and subsequent overuse, misuse of a diagnostic construct compromises our ability to actually understand the multiple etiologies of reading problems. At the fundamental level, I use the term mythlexia to mean that the definitional issues of dyslexia have not yet crossed Popper's demarcation between pseudoscience and science, falsifiability. If one proposes to use the term dyslexia as a scientific-based diagnosis to describe a set of clinical phenomena, then the proposition should be testable. A specific set of conditions should exist so that everyone can look at the same set of phenomena and determine whether or not they are seeing dyslexia. Mythlexia, then, does not mean dyslexia is a myth. Rather, it means the term dyslexia is science in waiting, like you said. Further, what the current states of nonspecific definitional issues, I believe that using the term detracts from our understanding of reading disabilities. By telling a parent of a student that they can't read, that their child is dyslexic or has dyslexia, I have not moved them forward in their understanding of the causes of their reading difficulty.
Very cool. I hope we're not putting you on the spot too much. Thomas out there, which he's one of the people that is so entertaining on some of the Facebook pages and whatnot that he amuses me. So if you're watching, we appreciate it.
We don't use the term dyslexia, like, at least where I am. We use a specific learning disability in the area of reading, writing, or math. So, like, I don't put that term into my reports. It's just a specific learning disability because the terms, I think, are confusing. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. But all right, I think we're kind of running out of time. I know we've got several more to go, so this might be it.
So retention, we can get through that quick, right? Because it's terrible.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, you're young, you're old, it's bad news.
It's bad. All the research says retention is bad. There's some research that says it might be good initially for a little while, but it ends up being terrible for everything, for social, emotional reasons, for academic. There are temporary gains, but negative impact on achievement and adjustment and everything.
And we've got a whole bunch of articles in the drive. I sometimes, when I want to make a point to a teacher, I just send them the link to that subfolder of the drive and be like, look at all this research. And it's got like all these different articles. So I don't even try to explain myself. I'm just like, here's this link. Read this.
Yeah.
So we're gonna move right on.
Yes.
ELL students fairly being identified, and some people are noticing that assessing EL students, they're being over-identified as having speech-language impairment or learning disabilities. And ELL evaluating students who are English language learners is hard because we had a whole episode, really, about this that you guys could reference. But the children take different lengths of time to learn, social language versus academic language, the BICS and the CALP, right? So really giving tests that are language loaded by us, who most of us don't speak the child's native language, it's not ideal.
For
Anything
sure.
to add, ladies?
I think that Monica, obviously, in the podcast that she was on, she was so awesome in explaining some of that. So we're not going to do it justice here in the 5 minutes that we've got left. But
bottom line is we need more bilingual psychs in the field. So come on out, get to graduate school. You speak 2 languages. We love you. We want you.
And graduate programs start to train everybody to know how to, fairly assess. I think that they do that now, but I think more so we're going to see a bigger push on that type of instruction. Okay.
Are we
sorry.
Are we done? I just quickly want to say about suspension, pros and cons, one of our bullet points. Just quickly that I think that we should look really closely at all the research on PBIS and also restorative justice practices. I think they go so nicely together, and they're both have a positive effect on reducing the number of suspensions, which suspension does not seem to help students in any way, really. I sometimes get comments from teachers on my page that say suspension in terms of levels of risk for other students and in the classroom environment are helpful because it removes it takes away a difficult situation. But yeah, that's it. I just wanted to talk about PBIS really quickly and restorative justice. I think those are 2 very positive directions that we can look into and go to.
I totally agree. I will say that as far as when I'm doing an eval, like an ED eval or something, suspensions do serve or can serve as a form of documentation. That's something that I look for. And so, yes, I understand that they're not an effective intervention, certainly, but sometimes you need documentation of things. So if something warrants a suspension, I'm certainly going to reference that in a report, and that's going to help explain what's going on. But we also, let's see, I think we can kind of lump executive functioning and grit really together really quickly. That there's some that say that, again, there's a definition problem. We don't really know what these things are, and also that it's difficult to measure things when you don't really know what they are. So they're kind of buzzwords right now, and lots of people are really into them. But we've got another side of people saying you're getting too deep into this without really knowing the research behind it. So that's just something to consider. You guys, thoughts?
Yeah. For sure, it's something there's not enough intervention data on. What's more than just a buzzword is our age versus grade norms. We have to get to this before we wrap up because this is real. This is in our tests. So we often give a test and have to decide, are we going with age or grade norms? And I always go with age, but some people don't. So, Rach, thoughts?
Okay, so with achievement testing, honestly, I tend to go with grade norms, and that's because achievement is something, if a child, say, has been retained or is a little bit old for their age, I want the comparison normative group to be what they've been exposed to. So if, they're in 2nd grade and haven't been taught multiplication, why am I holding them and testing them, to students who have? If they're young for their grade or they've been retained, their comparison group is mostly going to be made up of 3rd graders that maybe have already learned that and they have just not been exposed to it. So I tend to go with grade norms for achievement testing. When looking online and seeing that discussion that happened on age versus grade, I noticed that, and I didn't even realize that the WJ Cognitive has the ability to either use age or grade norms. And I thought about that and I was like, well, I would use age because cognitive development, I would think, is more related to your age than what grade you're in. But then somebody had posted that the manual actually says, the WJ manual, that the recommendation is to use grade norms for educational decisions and age norms for clinical decisions. So that really got me thinking. And I thought that that was interesting, and that can make a huge difference in an IQ score. And like I said, I don't use the WJ frequently, but maybe I should. I like that whole co-normed thing. I think that that is something that we should consider as school psychs, that if you're giving an IQ test to make a comparison to an achievement test, it would kind of make sense, and you're in the school setting, maybe use those grade norms for the IQ test and for the grade test, so you're comparing to that exact same normative sample. So I've been rethinking that myself. But yeah, anytime a conversation about that goes on online, you get all these people, age, grade, going back and forth, and mostly people go with age. So I might be a little bit of a minority there. Do you guys have thoughts?
I don't. I do want to make a final shout out to our friend Eric. He's my adopted supervisor. He's got tons of years and years of experience, and he's so amazing. And his comment was that districts are becoming more creative at reporting suspension, so numbers might look like they're reducing, but they don't address the issues. I say yes to restorative justice and PBIS approaches like Ross Green's, which is an interesting point too. I like collaborative problem-solving model. I think that's Ross Green. I think that's really interesting too. Thanks, Eric, for being there. All you interns, back off. He's my supervisor. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I want to say too, thank you, Eric, because I see that you supported my base rate craziness. So,
yes, he did.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh, he's the best. Okay, so we got to wrap up. We're out of time. Our next podcast is April 17th, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have someone from Social Thinking coming to talk to us. We're so excited. So please tune in, and thank you all for tuning in tonight.
All right. Night.
See you next